At first glance, your backyard seems completely ordinary. A few birds at the feeder, a flash of blue in the trees, maybe a woodpecker tapping on a nearby branch before disappearing into the woods. It's the kind of scene most of us stop noticing. But every now and then, something happens that doesn't make sense. A bird appears with bright pink feathers that shouldn't exist. Another seems to fly like it's completely drunk. Tiny chirps drift across the sky in the middle of the night, even though every bird around you should be asleep. For decades, people noticed these strange moments and came up with all kinds of explanations. Some blamed unusual genetics. Others thought the birds were sick, or that it was simply one of nature's many unsolved mysteries. But over the past few years, scientists have uncovered answers that are even stranger than the theories, because it turns out these birds weren't behaving randomly at all. They were leaving clues. Clues that revealed hidden stories about what they eat, how they survive, and even how our changing world is quietly transforming the wildlife living right outside our windows. Today, we're uncovering some of the most fascinating backyard bird mysteries that scientists have finally solved. And stay until the end, because the final discovery led researchers to identify a bird they never expected to exist. A bird born after two species separated for nearly 7 million years suddenly crossed paths again. Number 1. The woodpecker that turned pink. For more than a century, birdwatchers across eastern North America occasionally spotted something that didn't seem possible. A northern flicker, a familiar backyard woodpecker, would suddenly have beautiful coppery pink feathers beneath its wings. Not orange, not yellow, pink. At first, people assumed they were looking at an unusual hybrid or a rare genetic mutation. After all, feather color is usually determined by a bird's DNA. So why did only some flickers have these strange feathers? The mystery puzzled ornithologists for decades. Then scientists decided to look much closer, not at the birds themselves, but at the pigments inside their feathers. Using samples collected from museum specimens over many years, researchers discovered something unexpected. The pink color wasn't produced by the bird at all. It came from a plant, specifically invasive honeysuckle shrubs that had spread throughout much of the eastern United States. These shrubs produce bright red berries containing an unusual pigment called rhodoxanthin. As northern flickers replace their feathers during late summer, they often feed heavily on these berries. Instead of breaking down completely during digestion, the pigment becomes incorporated into the bird's growing feathers. The result? Perfectly healthy woodpeckers with stunning pink wing feathers that seemed impossible only because no one realized the birds were literally wearing the colors of the berries they had eaten. In other words, the mystery wasn't hidden in the bird's genes, it was hidden in its lunch. And once scientists solved it, they realized these flickers were quietly revealing just how much invasive plants had begun changing the appearance of wildlife in our own backyards. But colorful feathers weren't the only mystery birds had been hiding. Sometimes they looked like they had spent the afternoon at a winery. Number 2. Why some birds seem drunk. Every autumn and winter, wildlife rehabilitation centers receive an unusual kind of patient. Birds that can't seem to fly straight. Some stagger across the ground, others crash into windows or trees. A few simply sit motionless, unable to balance. People often assume they've been poisoned or injured, but in many cases, something much stranger has happened. The birds are intoxicated. It sounds almost unbelievable. Yet scientists have documented this phenomenon in waxwings, blackbirds, thrushes, and several other berry-eating species. The culprit isn't human alcohol, it's nature itself. As temperatures fluctuate during late autumn, berries repeatedly freeze overnight and thaw during the day. That cycle creates the perfect conditions for natural yeast to ferment the fruit. Tiny amounts of alcohol begin forming inside the berries. Most adult birds can process small amounts surprisingly well. Some species even have relatively large livers that help them handle occasional fermented fruit. But younger birds or individuals that consume too many berries at once can become overwhelmed. Suddenly, they lose coordination. Their reactions slow. Their flight becomes unpredictable. Researchers have even found elevated alcohol levels in birds admitted to wildlife clinics after these strange incidents. To someone watching from their backyard, it looks almost impossible. A perfectly healthy bird suddenly behaving as though it forgot how to fly. Yet the explanation has been hanging on the branch all along. A handful of overripe berries transformed by nothing more than changing weather. It's another reminder that some of nature's strangest mysteries don't require extraordinary creatures. Sometimes they begin with ordinary birds eating ordinary fruit, and the next mystery may be the most surprising of all, because it involves something most people throw away without a second thought. A cigarette butt. Number 3. The birds that turned our trash into medicine. Take a walk through almost any city park or suburban neighborhood, and you'll find one thing birds never evolved to recognize: cigarette butts. Most of us see them as nothing more than litter, but a few small songbirds appear to see something entirely different. For years, researchers noticed that birds called blue tits were carrying discarded cigarette filters back to their nests. At first, it looked like a terrible mistake. Why would any bird deliberately surround its chicks with something full of toxic chemicals? It didn't make sense until scientists considered another possibility. What if the birds weren't making a mistake at all? What if they were using cigarette butts for a purpose? Researchers designed experiments comparing nests containing cigarette fibers with ordinary nests. They measured the health of the chicks and counted the number of parasites living alongside them. The results were remarkable. Nests containing cigarette material had far fewer fleas, mites, and other harmful parasites. The nicotine left behind in the filters acted as a natural insecticide, helping protect vulnerable nestlings from tiny pests that constantly feed on them. Even more surprising, chicks raised in these nests showed signs of being in better physical condition than those in untreated nests. Of course, there's a catch. Nicotine is still toxic, and scientists believe this unusual behavior is a trade-off rather than a perfect solution. The birds may be reducing parasites while exposing themselves to other harmful chemicals. Still, the discovery revealed something extraordinary. These birds weren't simply adapting to cities. They were learning to use human waste as a survival tool. It's an incredible example of how wildlife can solve new problems in unexpected ways. But some mysteries don't happen on the ground. Some happen hundreds of feet above your backyard, while almost everyone is asleep. Number 4. The tiny voices flying over your house. Have you ever stepped outside on a cool autumn night and heard a faint peep, then another and another? The sounds are so quiet that many people assume they're insects. Some think they're frogs, others dismiss them as distant noises carried by the wind. But for years, birders wondered the same thing. Who was making those calls in the middle of the night? The answer wasn't discovered by someone looking through binoculars. It came from a combination of weather radar, sensitive microphones, and thousands of bird observations collected over many years. Scientists working with Cornell's Birdcast project finally connected the dots. Those mysterious nighttime calls belong to migrating songbirds, especially Swainson's thrushes and other species traveling under the cover of darkness. While most of us are asleep, millions of birds are silently crossing the continent. They're not flying alone. They communicate with short, high-pitched flight calls that help them stay connected as they navigate through darkness. Researchers also noticed something fascinating. After cold fronts, and especially on foggy nights or in areas filled with artificial lights, the birds call even more frequently. Many become slightly disoriented, and those tiny calls may help them maintain contact with one another as they continue their journey, which means the next time you hear a faint peep drifting through the darkness, you might not be hearing something in your neighborhood at all. You could be listening to travelers passing high above your house, continuing a migration that has been repeated for thousands of generations. It's one of those incredible moments that has always been there. We simply didn't know what we were hearing, but the final mystery may be the most astonishing of all. Because it isn't just an explanation for unusual bird behavior, it's the story of a bird that, until recently, shouldn't have existed. Number 5. The backyard bird. No one thought was possible. A backyard birder in Texas noticed something strange visiting the feeder. At first glance it looked familiar, but something wasn't right. Its colors seemed confused, part blue, part green. It didn't match any bird in the field guides. The observer did exactly what many curious bird lovers would do. They took a photograph. That single picture eventually reached scientists, who realized they might be looking at something extraordinary. Researchers carefully captured the bird and analyzed its DNA. The results confirmed what no one expected. This wasn't an unusual blue jay. It wasn't an unusual green jay either. It was both. Genetic testing showed the bird was an almost perfect 50-50 hybrid, a green jay mother and a blue jay father. Two species separated by roughly 7 million years of evolution had somehow produced offspring. Scientists nicknamed it the grue jay, combining the words green and blue. But the biggest surprise wasn't the hybrid itself. It was why it happened. For generations, these two species rarely encountered one another because their ranges barely overlapped. Then, over recent decades, both gradually expanded into new areas. Green jays moved farther north, blue jays pushed farther west. Eventually, their paths crossed in neighborhoods around San Antonio. For the first time in millions of years, they met. And one ordinary backyard became the place where scientists documented a bird unlike any they'd seen before. It's a powerful reminder that our backyards aren't frozen in time. They're constantly changing, sometimes slowly enough that we never notice. Other times the changes are so dramatic they create an entirely new chapter in nature's story. The next time you look out your window and see birds visiting your feeder, remember this. What seems ordinary today may actually be part of a mystery that scientists haven't solved yet. The pink feathers, the birds that accidentally get drunk, the tiny midnight voices overhead, the clever use of cigarette butts as medicine, even the discovery of an entirely new hybrid bird. None of these mysteries were solved by magic. They were solved because someone noticed something unusual and decided to ask a simple question: why? And that's one of the most exciting things about nature. No matter how familiar your backyard feels, it may still be hiding discoveries that no one has fully understood yet. So tell me in the comments, which of these bird mysteries surprised you the most? And have you ever spotted a bird in your own backyard that made you stop and wonder if you were seeing something no one else had noticed? I'll see you in the next one.